Good afternoon, folks, and welcome back to Bert's Chocolate Lab, the Chocolate Lab. Today we're going to work on a fail-safe cookie recipe. I'll be giving you little hints along the way to keep those cookies from spreading and becoming these flat, thin, crispy, inedible things. Today's cookie that I'm going to do is going to be a chocolate raspberry cookie with a white chocolate frosting. It was inspired by my friend Sharon, so this one's for you, Sharon. First thing we want to do is we want to preheat our oven to 350 degrees. While that's working, what we're going to do is make our cookie dough. Now, first thing we want to start with is 2 sticks of room temperature softened butter. Very important that you have soft butter, makes it easier for creaming, otherwise it just becomes a big clumpy mess and you'll wind up with biscuits and not cookies. One. And 2. To this, we will add 1½ cups of sugar. Break out your hand mixer, or if you happen to have a stand mixer, that's perfectly fine. If you have a stand mixer, I would recommend using the bread hook, or better off yet, the paddle, because it will scrape the sides of the bowl. And if you don't, you're going to spend every 5 seconds scraping down the sides of the bowl to make sure everything gets mixed properly. That's why I prefer the good old hand mixer. Cream the sugar and the butter until it is all fully mixed and of a nice creamy, thick consistency. Okay, the next thing we're going to need is 2 eggs, 2 teaspoons of raspberry extract. Now, if you were making a standard chocolate chip cookie, you could get away with a teaspoon of vanilla because you don't want to overpower anything else, but this is actually a raspberry cookie, so we're going to use 2 teaspoons of raspberry extract. Then we'll use the beater again and combine this all until it's of a good, consistent quality, somewhat similar to a custard. There we have it. Now for the chocolate part of the equation. At this point, we're going to add ½ cup of unsweetened cocoa powder, and ½ cup of powdered sugar. Now, if you weren't making a chocolate cookie, what I would suggest you do is instead of 1.5 cups of sugar at the beginning, you add a full 2 cups of sugar, and then later on will compensate for the other half a cup with the flour. You'll add an extra half a cup of flour. Okay, so when you start beating this in, now you've got powdered products in here, start your beater on very low until you've got it completely combined. Because otherwise you're just going to make a mess everywhere. Okay, so that's completely combined. Now at this point it's still going to be of a kind of thin, creamy consistency. We're going to take care of that right now by adding the other dried ingredients, the flour and the baking powder. So at this point what we want is a tablespoon of baking powder. Now this is important. A lot of recipes will call for a teaspoon of baking soda. That's why your cookies are spreading out all over the place. Use baking powder. What baking powder is 1 part baking soda and 2 parts cream of tartar, which will help the eggs. It's an acid that helps the eggs to set up and congeal a little better. So by using a tablespoon, we have our 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar. It makes all the difference in the world in these. So there we have a teaspoon of baking powder. To this, we also need to add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, because baking powder having baking soda in it, if you don't add a little bit of salt, you're going to wind up with a flat, weird-tasting concoction, whether you're making biscuits, whether you're making cookies, breads, cakes, whatever. So, very important that we add a little bit of salt. It also has an added effect of helping the chocolate to just really come alive. Then, we add 2½ cups of all-purpose flour. Now, as I was saying before, if you weren't adding the ½ cup of cocoa and the ½ cup of powdered sugar, you're just making a regular, for example, chocolate chip cookie, what you would do is instead of 1½ cups of sugar at the beginning, make it 2 cups of sugar. That compensates for the powdered sugar. And then instead of 2½ cups of flour, you want to make it 3 cups of flour. That accounts for the other ½ cup of cocoa, which will give your cookie the proper consistency and texture. Now once again, you want to keep your beaters on low for this. You've got powdered product in here, you don't want it everywhere. Now, once you've got all the powdered ingredients in there combined, you can crank it up too high and really make sure that everything is well combined, well mixed. It should be a nice, thick batter. You're going to want to crank your beaters up high, because if you leave it on low, this batter is kind of thick. It could burn out your motor. But as you can see, a nice, thick cookie batter. Not bad. So what we're going to do, you're going to get a cookie sheet lined with tin foil, spray it down with a little Pam or non-stick spray. You're going to put your cookies on here. Now, a lot of batter recipes will say spread the cookies 2 inches apart. things like that, because they're using the baking soda and the cookies may spread. Our cookies are going to rise. You can put them a little closer together, but you don't want to put too many on there because otherwise they're not going to cook in the proper amount of time. You're going to have to cook it longer. They'll burn on the bottom. So what we're going to use, standard little tiny ice cream scoop. Everybody's got one of these around the house somewhere. And this will keep your cookies a consistent size. And it's the perfect amount for this batter and the amount of time we're going to cook them in the oven. I've learned this by screwing up a lot of recipes. Anyway, here we go. Okay, so we place these in a 350-degree oven for 10 minutes. And now we just wait for the magic to happen. When they come out of the oven, we're going to set them down for a minute or two, let them cool a bit, then we'll remove them from the cookie sheet, because if you move them right away, they're going to fall apart. So give them a minute or so to set up, and then move them to your cooling racks and let them cool thoroughly. But we'll get back to that in a minute as soon as these come out. Okay, so our cookies have cooked for 10 minutes. We take them out of the oven. In the meantime, I've prepared more trays because obviously this recipe makes more than just a couple trays of cookies. The important thing I find here is to have several trays lined with aluminum foil and ready to go. That way you can just keep switching them out and rotating them. Set your next set for 10 minutes. We want to let these cookies sit here for 3 or 4 minutes before we actually move them. This way they become, a little more solid. If I try to pick them up now, they're just going to fall apart. But when you finish, these cookies should look like this. Not spread all over the place, nice, uniform, round cookies, thick, fluffy. We're going to let them cool completely, and then we're going to work on making a white chocolate icing to go on top of them. Okay, so our cookies have all come out of the oven. They're sitting on the rack. They've come to room temperature. What we're going to do now is melt a little white chocolate to frost the top of it. Really very simple. You take a simple old saucepan like this, put an inch and a half of water, not too much more than that. Get a bowl that fits nice at the top so it doesn't touch the water, and turn it on. Fairly medium-high heat. Get that steam rising. Then we'll grab some white chocolate. Now, white chocolate chips, perfectly fine. Especially if you don't use a lot of white chocolate. No sense in buying that big block of chocolate that you can get at the Mega Marts. This is 12 ounces of chocolate, white chocolate chips. Now, the important part in melting this chocolate, as it's going, is to stir it. Don't let water get in there. That's going to seize it. White chocolate is basically the same as chocolate, except it has no cocoa in it. It's all just cocoa butter. So, your chances of it seizing a lot more possible. Okay, so we've got the chocolate melted here, bottom to keep the steam up and keep it in a liquid state. Now, to ice the cookie, really quite simple. We just grab a little bit of this, spread it on nice, thin layer. It will solidify back into chocolate. Place it back on the cooling rack and let them sit for a little while. So here we have a nice, beautiful chocolate raspberry cookie with white chocolate icing. It's
just to die for.
Mmm. Yummy.
That's a good cookie.